guys, welcome to Z's Biology. If you are new to the channel, please consider subscribing.
With the retina, we are done with the layers of the eyeball. The outermost layer consisting of the sclera cornea, the middle layer, the innermost layer, which is the sensory layer. The outer layer of innermost layer, is retina, that is the pigment epithelium, and the inner layer of the retina, that is the neuronal layer, often referred also we can say the neural layer of retina. Okay, we are complete. We can say neural layer. It is actually the same to the neural layer or the neural layer of the retina. So apart from the layers of the retina, walls of the retina, all these, there are a few more important structures in the eyeball. Let's continue with them. Okay, starting from, if I talk about this part, posterior, if you can see this part, this from retina till the posterior part of the lens, this part is known as the vitreous body. This part is known as the let me write it, this whole part is known as the vitreous body. It's actually known as the vitreous body because it is filled with a jelly-like substance here known as the vitreous humor. So vitreous body is apart from the posterior part of the lens up till the retina, the neural layer of the retina actually, and this part is filled with a jelly-like substance called the vitreous humor. It is filled with all the substance. What is this? Vitreous humor. Yes. So it's an important fluid in the eyeball, which is in the vitreous body from lens up till the retina, and this part is filled with a fluid, jelly-like substance known as the vitreous humor. So apart from the vitreous humor, there is one more very important fluid in the eyeball. There is the aqueous humor. So this part, if we talk about the anterior segment of the eyeball, yes, anterior segment of the eyeball is filled with the aqueous humor. Aqueous humor. This is also a very important fluid in the body. Actually, spelling C will not come. Aqueous humor. It's actually yes. Aqueous humor is filled in the anterior segment of the eyeball. So as I have already told you that the anterior segment and the posterior segments of the eyeball, and two chambers also in the eyeball. I have told you before in the lecture that we'll talk about the chambers of the eyeball later in the lecture. So yeah, aqueous humor actually it is produced by the ciliary body. Okay, let me explain you in detail ciliary body. This ciliary body, I have told you that this is the part of the middle layer of the eyeball, choroid, iris, and the ciliary body. In ciliary body, we have some ciliary processes. Here, if we talk about, we have some ciliary processes. In ciliary body, we have ciliaris muscle, we have ciliary processes. Ciliaris muscle in the ciliary body helps us in changing the length of the lens. Okay, ciliary processes. Ciliary process actually they produce the aqueous humor. Yes, ciliary processes which are a part of the ciliary body, they produce the aqueous humor and drains after the production of aqueous humor. They drains the aqueous humor into the posterior chamber of the eyeball. Posterior chamber, I haven't talked about it. Let's talk about it now. Yes, anterior segment from the cornea up till the lens, and posterior segment up till the from the lens up till the retina. But the posterior chamber and the anterior chambers, as you can see, this diaphragm-like structure is called the iris. Iris actually helps us to divide the anterior segment into two parts. One, this, and one is this one. So in the anterior segment, we have two different chambers known as the anterior chamber, which are actually divided by the iris, and second one is the posterior chamber of the eyeball. So in the anterior segment, iris divides anterior segment into two parts, anterior chamber and the posterior chamber. From here it is the anterior chamber till cornea, and from here it is the posterior chamber up till the lens. So why it is divided? Because the ciliary processes of the ciliary body produce the aqueous humor and drains the aqueous humor in the posterior chamber, and further from the posterior chamber the aqueous humor in the eyeball goes and into, forward in the anterior chamber too. It is clear about the vitreous humor or the aqueous humor and ciliary body, ciliary processes that they produce the aqueous humor. So now let's talk about the iris. As I have told you about the ciliary body, let's talk few points about the iris as well. Iris, this is a part of the middle layer of the eyeball. I have already told you, middle layer of the eyeball, that is nutritive coat of the eyeball and highly vascularized in nature. It has many vessels. Iris, as you can see, but I haven't told you about this part of the iris, that between the iris, between both the iris, there is a hollow space which is known as the iris aperture. Yes, this hollow space, as you can see, let me draw it with a darker. This is the iris aperture, but commonly it is known as the pupil. It is known as the, I am writing here that this is the pupil. Sometimes it is also called the iris aperture. So this is the hollow space or the hollow aperture between the iris, both the iris. In the size of the pupil, iris controls the amount of light entering into the eye, and thus it behaves as an adjustable diaphragm. This iris can control the amount of light entering into the eye through the pupil. Pupil, the hollow aperture between the iris. This space is known as the pupil. So yeah, this was about the iris, which is a part of the middle layer of the eyeball. Iris is the anterior part of the middle layer of the eyeball. So this, I haven't talked about this part, the blue part I am talking about. This is the lens. Yeah, now let us talk about few points about the lens. Actually, this part nature has gifted us in our eyeball. This part is known as the lens. Nature has provided us biconvex lens in our eyes, a crystalline biconvex lens. It actually refracts the light rays. When the light rays are coming from here, then there, here, so it is actually refracting. It's the lens. You know, you must have learned in physics that the lens refracts the light rays passing through it. So it is actually refracting the light rays towards the retina, and it tries to focus all the light rays on the retina, on the neural layer of the retina, so that the neural layer of retina, which contains of the photosensitive cells, the photoreceptors, the rods and cones, light rays. Apart from this, lens has an clinical importance of lens. There is the cataract. Yes, you must have heard about the cataracts. Very common disease at old age. It is actually the accumulation or the clumps of crystalline proteins. Yes, when crystalline proteins are accumulated over the lens, or the clumps are formed of the crystalline proteins, they result in a disease called the cataracts, and it is a cloudiness nature of the lens that our lens, the nature which nature has provided us for vision in our eyeball. The clumps of crystalline proteins are formed all over the lens, resulting in the cataracts, and it results in the blurriness of objects, and obviously it will affect our vision. It is actually the blurriness or the cloudiness of the lens, the cataracts. So this was the lens, and last I would like to talk about the optic disc. Yeah, okay. Optic. So before going, one more part is left before digging into the optic disc. Let's see this part. This green part I have drawn over here. These are the suspensory ligaments. What are these called? These are called the suspensory ligaments. Suspensory ligaments actually holds the lens in place. Yes, suspensory ligaments attaches the lens to the ciliary body and holds the lens in place, the dilating nature. So this was the suspensory ligaments which holds the lens in place and it attaches the lens to the ciliary body. Now let's come to the optic disc. Yes, the optic disc. This part is the optic disc. Optic disc is actually the part, if we look by the ophthalmoscope into the eye, it's actually the optic disc. It is visible to us or the doctor. If doctor observes our eye through ophthalmoscope, it is at the back posterior part of the eye, and it is actually the part or the circular part of the eye, or the hole we can say, through which the optic nerves or the central artery which supply blood to the retina, they are piercing into the sclera. They are piercing into the sclera, they are piercing into the retina. And so optic disc is a part from where the arteries, the nerves or the central artery which supply blood to the retina are coming in and out. Nerves are coming in and out of the eyeball. So these are the optic nerves. Optic nerves are piercing optic nerves. Well, let me explain you. Piercing through the optic disc. This is optic disc. Through the optic disc into and out of the eyeball. Optic nerves are going into and coming out of the eyeball through the optic disc. And optic disc, in this region, optic disc region, there are no photoreceptors, there are no rods and cones. This is not a light sensitive area, and hence it is also called the blind spot area of the eye. Yes, it is also called the blind spot area because there are no photoreceptors, there are no rods and cones in this region, and it's called the blind spot of the eye.